I just had a hawk land right above me. That is really cool. Good morning and welcome to the Real Outdoors, where we talk about hunting, camping, and gear. Today we are going to talk about those last two, camping and gear, and how to stay warm in these cold camping nights we have coming up. So let's get to it. Now, I know some of you have already had some cold nights camping. As you know, I live in Florida. We don't get too many cold nights, but we get a fair number of fairly cold nights. But you may be wondering, what exactly do I know about cold weather camping? Well, let me fill you in a little bit on my background in cold weather camping before we get to the tips and techniques to keep you warm during those cold nights. I grew up primarily in Minnesota and Illinois until I moved to Florida when I was a teen. I had my Boy Scouting experience in the state of Illinois with many nights camping in the snow. More recently, my son and I participated in a winter dog sledding trek at Northern Tier Upik in Ely, Minnesota. We dog sledded on frozen lakes and camped under the stars. Some of you may call it cowboy camping, in temperatures as low as 26 degrees below zero. Although I'd done a fair bit of cold weather camping before, this trip really dialed in my cold weather techniques and even taught me a few new techniques to use going forward in cold weather camping. I'm naturally a cold weather sleeper, meaning it doesn't take much for me to be cold when I'm camping in the outdoors. It's probably from being in Florida so long, but I just really have a hard time staying warm at night. During that camping trip to Northern Tier, where it got down to 26 below zero Fahrenheit, I didn't get cold while I was sleeping. I may have gotten a little claustrophobic in my sleeping system, but I didn't get cold. So if me, a cold sleeping Florida boy, can stay warm at 26 below, anyone can stay warm with these techniques. Now that you have a little bit of my background, let's jump right into the tips and tricks for staying warm in cold weather when you're in the outdoors. Tip number one is to stay dry. Wetness will not only make you miserable in the outdoors in cold weather, it can kill you. It's the number one way to lose all your warmth is to get wet when you're cold weather camping. Other than the obvious of staying out of water when you're in cold weather camping conditions, the best way to avoid wetness is to use layering with non-cotton clothes. Cotton is actually forbidden at Northern Tier and Upik, and there's good reason for it. Cotton gets wet easily, and once it gets wet, it loses all of its insulative properties. So it's basically like sucking all the warmth out of your body as soon as it gets wet. You really want to shoot for synthetic materials that breathe and don't lose their insulation properties when they get wet. And we're going to talk a little more about what to look for in your clothes for layering in the outdoors in cold weather. I am a big fan of fleece and performance fabrics for my clothes anytime I'm camping, whether it's the summer or the winter. I start with something like this. It's basically a Columbia long sleeve synthetic shirt, performance fabric, and that's my base layer up top. Down below, I want a heavy fleece base layer, basically fleece long johns, like these. I got these from Cabela's. They're their heavyweight fleece base layer. I'm sure you can find something very similar on Amazon, but I'll put links to everything down in the description. Don't worry. This is my base layer on the bottom. Base layer on the top here was like a performance Columbia shirt. And so that's the start of my layers. Next is my mid layer. I didn't really put a mid layer down below, but on top I put a pullover fleece like this. That was pretty much my mid layer. If you want to put something under these fleece, you could do traditional synthetic long johns. I have done that in the past as well. I like merino wool. I didn't really feel the need for this because my outer shell and this were really enough, even down to 26 below in Minnesota. But again, if you really have a hard time with cold weather, you could add a base layer underneath here and use these fleece, heavyweight fleece long johns as your mid layer. But this was all I did in Minnesota. And then on top, your outer shell, you want to have something that's waterproof and gives you some insulation. And so on my bottom, my legs, for my outer shell, I used fleece lined snow pants like these. These are Columbia snow pants, skiing pants, whatever you want to call them. They have areas that are fleece lined. They're water resistant, waterproof on the outside. I like them because they're just pants, they're not full bibs. They also fit over boots. Big key there, make sure your outer shell goes over your boots. A lot of people tuck them into their boots, but say for example, you're doing like I was, dog sledding on a frozen lake, and you hit a soft patch and your leg goes through the ice. It's basically gonna create a funnel down inside your boots in order to really get that water in there. Like I said, that's tip number one, stay dry. So you don't want water going into your boots. I actually had these. I did step into a soft patch on one of the lakes up to my knee. I had these on over the top of my boots. The water did not get down into my boots. I did not get wet even stepping into the lake with these on. So they worked really well as long as you use them the proper way. So that was the outer shell on my legs. For up top, very similar. A water resistant / waterproof fleece lined outer shell like this one. This is just, it's kind of like a windbreaker material on the outside. Like I said, water resistant and fleece lined on the inside. Kept me very warm, kept the wind out. It does have a hood back here that tucks up into the collar. I never really used that because of some of the other things I use, like a basic ski cap and fleece lined buff on my face. But those are basically my layers right there. The snow pants, the heavyweight fleece underneath, the Columbia shirt as a base, my Columbia pullover as a mid layer, and then this jacket as my outer shell. As you get warm, like a lot of times when we're pushing that dog sled and running behind the dogs, I would take this off and just have my fleece pullover on. It was more than warm enough, but I could take layers off so I wasn't getting my clothes really wet from sweating in them. And that's all part of this stay dry tip. So layering is a big part of that. The second part of staying dry is making sure you have a completely new dry set of clothes to sleep in. And so for that, I had a whole other set of clothes that I kept in a waterproof bag for when I was ready to go to bed and change into those clothes, so they're totally dry. What did I use for jammies at 26 below? Well, I would use a pullover like this one. Not this exact same one that I wore all day and is wet from sweat, but a new clean one that was dry in a separate bag, kept dry all day. But basically the same thing, just another fleece pullover. Same thing on the bottom. I would use the heavyweight fleece Cabela's long underwear. Same thing, I had a second pair that I kept in a separate bag, waterproof, away from everything else, so it's nice and clean and dry when I get ready to get into my bed. So that was upper and lower. Now, in addition to that, you want to have clean, dry socks to wear to bed to keep your feet warm. I love these. These are fleece socks, and they're super big, so they're not going to constrict your feet. They're nice and warm. They're almost like slippers, and I got these from Amazon. Again, I'll put that link down in the description so you can find them. But I absolutely love these. Keep you very, very warm in your sleeping bag at night. And so this is what I wore on my feet. You can see they're really big. I don't even think I could get these into boots. I specifically got these to wear as part of my sleeping system at night to stay warm. So I'd have those. Then I had this to keep my neck warm. This is a fleece lined face shield from Salt Armor. I love these things. I use them when I'm hunting. I use them when I'm camping. I absolutely love them. I've talked about them before in videos. And that's what I used at Northern Tier. I've actually improved on this just a little bit. So let me show you what I do now for my head and neck. Now I've showed you this before in my hammock cold weather camping video. This is a down hood. It also covers your neck. It's very, very comfortable. It's not constricting anywhere. And it also kind of acts like a pillow and hearing protection. It kind of dulls the noise, so you don't have to have earplugs in or anything like that if you're in a noisy campground. And so this is what I use now instead of the buff. Absolutely love this thing. I mean, it's 20 bucks. How can you go wrong? I'm not going walking around the trail with this thing or anything, but this is part of my cold weather sleeping system anytime I go camping in cold weather. Super lightweight, packs down real small, keeps you very, very warm. And that covers your head. You can cinch it up so just your eyes are showing. That's something we had to be really careful of in Minnesota. You don't want bare skin exposed to 26 below weather for sure. So you got to be careful of those things. But the key to that whole thing, that whole tip with sleeping gear, is you have to keep them separate. You can only wear them for sleeping in. You don't want to be sweating in them. And we'll get into a little more detail about how to properly care for your sleeping clothes as we go along in the video. Tip number 2 has to do with insulation. And it's a perfect jumping off point from bedclothes onto insulation, because your bedclothes form part of your insulation when you're sleeping at night in the outdoors. Let's talk a little bit about insulation. Insulation is exactly that. It's insulation. It's not really providing warmth. You are providing the warmth with your body heat. The insulation is keeping that body heat from escaping into the environment. That's really what it boils down to. You shouldn't expect your insulation to provide that heat for you. It's just keeping the heat in you that you already have. So with that in mind, those bedclothes I talked about earlier, you should be putting those inside of your sleeping bag or quilt or sleeping system about an hour or so before you plan to get into bed. That way it's not sitting in the outdoors, even in the bag. When it gets down below zero, your clothes, even inside of a bag, are going to get cold. So you want to put them down inside your sleeping bag or sleeping system so that they're warm when you put them on. And we'll talk a little more about that. I've got another tip for you for how to really warm your clothes and your sleeping bag up before you crawl into it for a cold winter's night. Also, you want to be sure that you have the proper sleeping bag or sleeping system for the weather that you're expecting to encounter. So for example, at Northern Tier, when we knew we were going to be well below zero for the night, we went out with a sleep system that would accommodate that type of weather. Well, what was that? Well, it was a minus 30-degree sleeping bag, and then inside of that, you put a 20-degree sleeping bag. So you layered your sleeping system just the way you layered your clothes on your body. Of course, you had some insulation underneath, a couple sleeping pads, a tarp, things like that, but the main insulation component was a minus 30-degree bag and a 20-degree Fahrenheit rated bag inside of that. So this is my 20-degree Enlightened Equipment top quilt. This works for almost every single camping instance I'm going to encounter, other than those extreme conditions like I'd had in Minnesota. Sometimes when I know it's going to be really cold, I will throw a fleece blanket inside of this for a little added warmth and insulation. Again, like I said at Northern Tier, we put this inside of a minus 30-degree bag. But it's really about knowing your equipment, knowing what the conditions are going to be, and making sure you have the proper insulation for the weather that you're going to encounter. Tip number 3 is one of my favorites. In fact, I created a separate video just for this cold weather tip, calling it the best cold weather tip for keeping you warm. And I'll link to that video up in the eye in the sky so you can check that out if you'd like. But this is what I call creating your own personal heater. What does that mean? Well, about an hour before you go to bed, remember I said throw your clothes into your sleeping system about an hour-ish before you plan to go to bed? The same goes for this plan. You get a hard wall Nalgene, like this one, and you fill it with hot water, close to boiling basically. These should handle boiling water, no problem. Pour it into here, screw that cap on tight so that you don't leak any water out of it, and throw that into your sleeping bag about an hour before you plan to go to bed, along with your sleep clothes. Now this is a 16-ounce one. That's what we used at Northern Tier. You can use the 32-ounce ones also. But this acts as a little heater. So when you go to get into bed and pull your bedclothes out and to change into those, it's going to feel like you just pulled them out of a hot dryer. And your whole sleeping bag is going to be nice and cozy and warm. So there's going to be some heat in there that insulation is able to hold inside. The other thing is, all through the night, this stayed warm. Even at minus 26 degrees, it stayed warm all the way through till morning. And all through the night, I would move it around to different areas that were getting chilly. And it was like my own personal heater. So if this shoulder was a little bit exposed or feeling a draft coming through the hole in my sleeping bag, I moved this up here and it kept me warm and warmed up that area, and then I'd move it around. And like I said, it stayed warm the entire night. It's like having your own personal heater. And then when I got up in the morning, I drank the water, had nice warm water to drink to really warm your insides right as you're getting out of your sleeping system into that cold weather. Great way to warm you up. This last tip is kind of 4 tips in one, and that is all the things to do as part of getting ready for bed. So there's several things I do in cold weather in order to get ready to actually crawl into my sleeping system for a warm winter's night. And that starts with making sure you have a full belly. You want to eat your dinner as close to bedtime as possible. You want a nice full belly. That food in your belly basically acts as fuel. It's kind of like fueling up a lantern that you want to run all night. Same thing for your body. You want fuel for your body to keep you warm all night long. And so you want to eat dinner as close to bedtime as possible. The same goes for water and hydration. You need to make sure you're hydrated all day long in cold weather. When you're dehydrated, your blood vessels constrict, and then basically you have less blood running through your arms and your legs and your body that's keeping you warm. If you stay hydrated, those blood vessels stay nice and full, keeping everything nice and warm. Same thing right before bed. You want to make sure you're good and hydrated before going to bed. As my kids like to say, hydrate or dihydrate. Now, staying hydrated leads right into my next tip. Go pee. Make sure you pee before crawling into your sleeping bag. And even more importantly, if you're sleeping at night and you feel the urge to go, don't try to hold it. I know it's going to be hard, I know it's going to be cold, but get out of your sleeping bag, out of your tent, out of your hammock, and go pee when it's cold. All that energy you're using to make sure you don't wet the bed is energy that is not keeping you warm. You're just going to get colder and colder and colder the longer you wait to go pee. And like I said, I know it's going to be hard, I know it's going to be cold, but go fast and go pee when you need to. The last thing you do before you get into your sleep clothes and into your sleeping system is to do some exercise. Get that inner furnace. Remember I said you're the one that's providing the heat? Your clothes, that Nalgene, your sleeping bag, that's all just keeping that heat in. You're providing the heat. So get that heat going, get that furnace going, and do some exercise. Go for a walk, maybe a little jog, do some jumping jacks, some squats, anything to kind of get that blood pumping, get you warmed up before you get into bed. Couple of notes on this. One, as I said, do this exercise before you put your sleep clothes on. The last thing you want to do is get all hot and sweaty and make your sleep clothes wet. You want them nice and dry. So keep your day clothes on while you're doing your exercise before you put on your jammies for the night. You also don't want to do things like burpees or push-ups, basically anything that gets you close to the ground or in the snow, because that's not helping you get warm. You're going to be going next to really cold ground or snow and getting soaking wet from the snow. So you want to avoid those types of exercises. Like I said, a walk, a run, jumping jacks, things that keep you upright, but really get your heart going and getting that furnace going inside to warm you up before you jump in the sack. So those are my tips for staying warm when you're sleeping in the outdoors in cold weather. I have a lot of other cold weather camping tips, things like how to keep your food from freezing, how to set up a cowboy camping setup in the snow or in the cold weather, or how to prevent frostbite or how to recognize the signs of frostbite, things like that. So this was really just exclusive to staying warm while sleeping at night. I had a few viewers that asked me certain questions in the comments about staying warm in cold weather, how warm tents are, how warm my quilt is, things like that. So I thought it would be good to do a whole video on my techniques for staying warm in cold weather. I can do videos on those other cold weather camping things. If you guys are interested, let me know down in the comments and I can make those videos for you too. I'd also love to hear your tips for staying warm in cold weather. This is what I do, this is what works for me, but I'd love to hear down in the comments, what do you guys do? Did I miss something? Is there something I can improve on? Is there better gear that you use? I really have fine-tuned this and love the layer setup that I have, but I would be happy to learn more about better gear and things like that. I hope you got something out of it. Like I said, when I went to Northern Tier, I learned a few new things like the Nalgene personal space heater. Those were great tips. I got to use them and see how well they worked in a cold weather environment, so I know they work even down to 26 below zero. Don't forget to smash that like button if you're so inclined, and click that red subscribe button so you can keep up with all of our new content. And as always, I look forward to seeing you in the real outdoors.